All right, let's dive in. Today we're looking at the work of Melanie Klein.
Oh, excellent.
You sent over some really fascinating excerpts um, about her theories on envy and gratitude,
Yes,
specifically from Envy and Gratitude and other works.
right.
I think this is going to be a really rich discussion.
I think so too.
So for our listener who might not be familiar with Melanie Klein, can you give us a little background on who she was and what she's known for?
Sure. So, Melanie Klein was a pioneering psychoanalyst
Okay.
who built on Freud's ideas,
Mm,
but she really carved her own path, especially when it came to the significance of early childhood.
okay. So she was really interested in those really formative years,
Absolutely.
how those years shape us as adults.
Very much so.
So, like Freud, she was really interested in the unconscious mind,
Yes,
that hidden part of ourselves that influences our thoughts and behaviors.
exactly. That sort of area that we don't have direct access to.
Right, right. And she also really delved into those defense mechanisms, those unconscious ways we protect ourselves from difficult feelings,
Yeah,
like things like repression or denial,
right.
basically mental strategies to avoid facing things that are just too tough to deal with.
Exactly. Exactly. Protect ourselves from anxiety.
Okay, and Freud also explored the Oedipal complex,
He did.
that whole idea of a child's unconscious desires for their parent.
Yes.
But Klein felt that these fundamental relationship patterns
Uh-huh.
begin forming much earlier in infancy through that relationship with the mother.
That's right. Much, much earlier.
So she's really saying our emotional blueprint is being drawn up
Yeah,
before we can even talk.
absolutely. In those very early months.
I'm curious, what initially grabbed your attention about Klein's work?
It was really her emphasis on the mother-infant relationship and particularly the emotional significance of the mother's breast.
Hmm.
It's not just about the physical act of feeding, but what the breast represents to the infant. It becomes a symbol of comfort, satisfaction, frustration, really that whole spectrum of feeling.
So it's like that very first relationship
Yes,
becomes the template for all our future relationships.
exactly. Like a blueprint.
How we first experience love, disappointment, maybe even anger,
Mm-hmm.
really shapes how we approach those emotions later on in life.
Absolutely. Sets the stage.
Wow, that's a powerful concept.
It is. And it leads us perfectly into Klein's concept of envy,
Okay.
which she saw as a much deeper force.
Deeper than just like jealousy.
Yeah, much more primal.
Okay.
She thought it originated in infancy.
Mm.
So if you think about it, the infant sees the mother's breast as the source of all goodness, but they can't fully possess it.
Right.
And that triggers a very primal envy.
So instead of just wanting what the breast provides,
Yeah,
there's also this deeper desire to maybe even spoil it or destroy it
that was Klein's idea. Yes,
because it represents something they crave but can't completely have.
exactly. It's very powerful.
That's kind of a shocking idea, but
Yeah.
it makes sense.
She argued that those early emotions are incredibly intense.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Those unresolved feelings of envy can carry over into adulthood and influence how we perceive and interact with others.
So this could explain why some people are so quick to put others down or can't seem to be happy for someone else's successes.
That's right. It goes back to that early experience.
Wow. So envy is like this really potent force that can be pretty destructive?
It can be if it's not addressed.
Okay, so we've talked about envy,
Uh-huh.
but where does gratitude fit into all of this?
Well, gratitude is like the antidote, the balancing force.
Hmm.
And just like envy, it has its roots in those early experiences.
Okay.
When an infant receives consistent, loving care, their basic needs are met.
Yeah.
It forms the foundation for gratitude.
So if envy comes from a sense of lack,
Yes.
gratitude comes from a sense of being fulfilled.
Exactly. Having those basic needs met.
I see, I see. And that allows the infant to build a positive inner world.
Right. A sense of security and love.
And that influences how they form relationships later on.
Exactly. It's all interconnected.
But I'm guessing it's not always that simple, right?
You're right. It's a constant interplay.
Yeah.
Envy can block us from feeling grateful.
Okay.
It can make us perceive others more negatively.
Right. But you're saying gratitude can help us overcome those envious impulses.
It can. It's like a tug of war between the two.
So how do we make sure gratitude wins that tug of war?
That's a great question, and Klein explores some really interesting psychological mechanisms to explain that.
Okay.
But maybe it's a good place to pause and pick up on this in the next part of our deep dive.
Agree. We've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
Let's give our listeners some time to process all this.
Sounds good.
And we'll come back with more Kleining insights in part 2.
Looking forward to it. So, ready to jump back into the world of Melanie Klein?
Absolutely.
Mm.
I'm fascinated by this whole envy and gratitude dynamic.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that Klein identified some specific psychological mechanisms.
She did.
That can kind of help explain how this all works.
Right.
I'm all ears.
Okay, well, one of the big ones is called splitting.
Okay.
And it's something we all do,
Mm-hmm.
especially as infants.
Okay.
It's basically our way of simplifying the world by dividing everything into good or bad.
Okay.
Remember we were talking about the mother's breast
Right.
as being both good and bad to the baby?
Yeah.
Well, splitting helps them cope with those mixed feelings.
So it's kind of like how I organize my closet, work clothes,
Okay.
weekend clothes,
Right.
helps me avoid decision fatigue. you know?
Yeah.
But when we're talking about people,
Mm-hmm.
that seems a little extreme
It can be.
to just see them as all good or all bad.
It is crucial in early development,
Yeah.
but if we rely on it too much as adults,
Yeah.
it can really cause problems in our relationships.
Right, because then you're not seeing the whole person.
Exactly. You miss all those nuances.
Yeah, the complexity. So how does this splitting thing connect back to envy and gratitude?
Well, imagine you're stuck in that splitting mindset
Okay.
and you meet someone who seems to have everything you lack. Instead of appreciating their good qualities,
Yeah.
you might devalue them, see them as all bad
Oh, interesting.
to protect yourself from those feelings of envy.
So you kind of put them in a box,
You do.
labeled bad,
Right.
so you don't have to confront your own feelings of inadequacy.
Exactly. And that brings us to another one of Klein's key concepts,
Okay.
projective identification.
Projective identification.
This one's a little more complex,
All right.
but stick with me.
Okay.
So we've all experienced projection, right?
Yeah, like when you're in a bad mood
Exactly.
and suddenly everyone around you seems grumpy.
Yeah, like you're projecting your own feelings onto them.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that one.
We all do it,
Okay.
but projective identification goes a step further.
Okay.
It's not just projecting the feelings. It's about actually trying to make the other person act those feelings out.
Wait, so you're saying it's like manipulating someone
In a way, yes.
to embody the emotions we don't want to deal with?
Right, and it's often unconscious.
So we're not doing this intentionally,
No, not at all.
but it's still happening.
It is, and it's really powerful.
Wow, okay.
So let's say you're feeling insecure
Mm-hmm.
and envious of your friend's success.
Okay, yeah.
You might, without even realizing it,
Yeah.
start making little digs at them
Mm.
or pointing out their flaws,
Oh, wow.
almost like you're trying to bring them down to your level.
So it's not enough to just project the feelings.
No,
You're actually trying to elicit those same feelings in them.
exactly.
That's pretty intense.
It can be, and it can really damage relationships.
Yeah, I can see how that would create a lot of conflict.
Definitely.
So basically, we have all these unconscious patterns
We do.
that are influencing our interactions in ways we don't even realize.
All the time.
This is giving me a lot to think about.
And Klein believed that understanding these mechanisms was crucial,
Okay.
not only for personal growth, but for therapy, too.
And you mentioned she saw countertransference as a valuable tool.
I did.
Remind me what countertransference is again.
So countertransference is the therapist's own emotional response to the patient.
Okay.
Klein didn't think therapists should be blank slates.
So they should be aware of their own feelings.
Exactly, because those feelings can provide clues about what the patient is experiencing.
Especially on that unconscious level.
Right, it can be very revealing.
So the therapist is kind of like a participant in this emotional dance.
In a way, yes.
Their reactions reflecting the patient's inner world.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow, this is fascinating.
It is, and by observing those dynamics, the therapist can start to understand those unconscious patterns and help the patient gain insight into their own behavior.
This is all incredibly insightful.
It is.
But I'm curious to see how Klein actually applied these concepts in practice.
Well, that's the beauty of her work. It's not just theoretical.
Yeah.
She was a clinician, first and foremost.
Right.
And her theories grew out of her work with patients. She developed a whole approach to therapy, particularly with children.
Right. I remember reading about that.
That was really groundbreaking.
Her famous play therapy.
Exactly.
Tell me more about that.
Well, Klein believed that just like adults reveal their unconscious through dreams,
Okay.
children reveal it through play.
Ah,
So
interesting.
instead of having them sit on a couch and talk about their feelings,
Mm-hmm.
she created a safe space where they could express themselves through symbolic play.
So it's like using their natural language to understand their inner world.
Exactly.
Okay, so what would she do? Just observe them playing?
She'd carefully observe them,
Mm-hmm.
see what themes emerged,
Okay.
how they interacted with the toys.
Right.
And from that, she could get incredible insights.
So it's almost like watching little dramas unfold.
It was, and she was particularly interested in those early anxieties and conflicts.
Yeah, those primal emotions.
Exactly.
Do you have any examples from her clinical work?
Absolutely. One of her most famous cases was with a little boy named Richard. So Richard, he was brought to Klein for therapy
Yeah.
because of really severe aggression, destructive fantasies,
Yeah.
and intense anxiety.
It sounds like a really tough situation for everyone.
It was, yeah.
So how did she approach working with him?
Well, through play therapy,
Okay.
she observed how he would violently smash these toy cars against the wall.
Oh, my God.
And he would shout things like, "He took my mommy."
Wow.
Yeah, really intense stuff.
I mean, it's chilling to think about, but I can also see how that kind of play would be so revealing.
Right. And Klein interpreted these actions
Wow.
as expressions of Richard's fear of losing his mother's love,
Okay.
especially to his younger siblings.
So that goes back to envy.
Exactly.
That feeling of lacking something that someone else has. It makes you wonder if we all experience that as children,
Klein would say that we do.
even if we don't express it in such, dramatic ways.
Yeah, those early relationships are just so powerful,
Right?
especially with our caregivers.
They really shape us.
They do.
And she believed that unresolved envy,
Mm,
if it's not addressed,
Yeah.
can have long-lasting consequences.
it can.
So how did she work with Richard's envy?
Well, she didn't try to shut down his aggression
Okay.
or make him feel ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, she created a safe space for him
Right.
to express those difficult
And
emotions.
play.
Exactly.
So it's like allowing him to acknowledge those dark parts of himself without judgment.
Yeah, and by working through those feelings symbolically,
Okay.
Richard was able to gradually gain control over them.
Interesting. So his behavior started to change.
It did. His aggression lessened,
Hmm.
his anxiety decreased,
Wow.
and his relationships with his family improved.
That's incredible.
It really is.
That's a powerful example of how effective Klein's approach can be.
It is.
And I know she also worked with adults.
She did.
Did she use play therapy with them too?
Well, not literally, of course.
Right.
But she applied those same principles of
Mhm.
interpretation, focusing on their words, behaviors, and those dynamics in the therapeutic relationship.
Interesting.
One case that comes to mind involves a woman named Susan
All right.
who sought therapy for chronic feelings of emptiness and difficulty maintaining close relationships.
I feel like that's something a lot of people struggle with.
It is, but there was something deeper going on with Susan.
What was that?
Klein recognized that her struggles were rooted in envy.
Mm.
She constantly compared herself to others,
Right.
feeling inadequate
Mhm.
and resentful of their successes.
Okay.
She just couldn't genuinely celebrate their achievements without feeling diminished.
Like envy was preventing her from forming those close connections.
Exactly.
Because she couldn't truly see and appreciate others for who they were.
Yeah, she was always comparing and measuring herself against them.
So in therapy, did Susan project those feelings onto Klein?
She did.
So there's that projective identification happening.
Right.
Trying to evoke the same feelings in Klein.
That's right. But by recognizing those projections,
Okay.
Klein was able to help Susan see those patterns
Yeah.
and how they were impacting her relationships.
It sounds like a challenging process.
It was, but Susan gradually developed a capacity for genuine appreciation of others.
Oh, wow.
She started recognizing and celebrating their good qualities without feeling threatened.
That's amazing.
It really is.
It's like she was finally able to break free from this prison of envy.
Exactly. It's a profound transformation.
It really highlights how understanding these Kleinian concepts can be so powerful.
Yeah, they give us a whole new way to look at ourselves and our relationships.
It's like she's giving us a roadmap to our own emotional landscapes.
I like that. A roadmap.
And once we understand the terrain,
Mm-hmm.
we can navigate it better. But I think what resonates with me most
Yeah.
is her emphasis on embracing our complexity,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging those darker parts of ourselves
Right. We all have them.
without shame.
It's part of being human.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of human nature.
Good.
What's one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with today?
I think it's this. Pay attention to how envy and gratitude show up in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're aware of those patterns,
Yeah.
you can start to shift them.
Okay.
Cultivate gratitude,
Right.
celebrate the good in others, and remember that true fulfillment comes from lifting each other up.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And for our listener, if you're interested in exploring these ideas further,
Yeah,
I highly recommend checking out Klein's work.
it's fascinating.
It really is.
Lots to learn.
And on that note,
Okay,
we'll wrap up this deep dive.
sounds good.
Until next time,
See you then.
keep those minds curious and those hearts open.